All right, so I just posted in the chat, but good morning. Feel free to do an intro if you're open to it. I would love to see your name, what role you have in your institution. And we'll let folks just kind of trickle in. I know that there's a lot of different good presentations this morning, so not sure how many will be with us. Katie, I thought I met you before.
Yep.
Thought so. How are you at American University?
We're doing well. It's a quiet semester for us. Sadly, we don't have any students.
Oh, you don't?
We have emergency housing, but that's it.
Okay.
I mean, it was a good decision, and it's a lot. I mean, area institutions, GW, Georgetown are doing very similar.
Okay.
I think we have a lot of students that are in the neighborhood and have decided to come back and just do a lease somewhere, but the university just wouldn't have been able to manage everything in the district. Just before we were intending to bring students back, the district put into regulation like hotspots.
Okay.
So like you had to quarantine for so many days if you were coming from those locations, those states. And there was like, of the 50 states, like 45 of them.
Okay.
So
now, are you guys housing in the spring?
No.
Okay, so you're like full year, no students.
Yeah, we haven't. At this time, we're thinking no. We haven't announced anything yet. We'll know more, I think next week or the week after. We're trying to make that call. At this time, I'm anticipating, but no full answer has been determined. I think in a perfect world, yes, I would love to. But in my like logical world, if it's gonna be able to be doable.
Yeah, we got students on our campus. So for those that just joined us, good morning. I know sometimes you can't see the chat when you join late, so I'm just gonna repost my original message. I would love to see your name, what role you have in your institution, and we'll get started in about 2 minutes because 50 minutes goes by so quickly. And then for folks that are joining, they'll just pop in as they can. But I appreciate you guys popping in on my session. So we got Kutztown University. Let's see, we got, I never can pronounce this right, but is it Titus or Thaddeus Stevens College?
Thaddeus.
Well, I just know the Stevens because, that's my last name. So, so I at least know that one. All right. We have Davis and Elkins College, Lebanon, University of Maryland. We got a good group here. Wesley.
So on behalf of Makuho and the other and session presenters, I would like to welcome you to today's session. An evaluation form will be available on the conference website, and at the end of this session, I'll drop it in the chat. Don't forget to complete that. At the end of the session, we'll also do a quick thank you again and remind you about that so you don't have to keep that on your mind the whole time. And without further ado, I would like to introduce Gwendolyn Stevens.
Thank you, Katie. Good morning, everyone. We're bright and early. This is one of the first sessions for day 2 of the Makuho conference, and I'm super excited to be presenting today on something that I'm passionate about, which is programming. So this session is, for me, my style is I'm kind of informal, but with a little formalness to it. So I encourage you to ask questions if you have any as we go through. 50 minutes goes by so quickly. So it is my hope that it's more of a conversation and not me talking at you, but we're really in the space to really share, connect, and really learn about the work that we're doing on our college campuses. So my presentation today is a playbook for programming, and the focus is going to be on increasing the excitement, participation, and building community in your residential spaces. So again, my name is Gwendolyn Stevens. I am a House Fellow at Carnegie Mellon University, and I've been at the institution for a little over 3 years now. So let's get started. So here are just some of the learning outcomes. For me, it's my hope that you'll be able to increase your confidence and competencies when engaging with residents in some of these non-traditional spaces and during these unprecedented times. I hope you'll be able to leave today to identify tools and strategies that will help you foster your community building. We're going to be able to explore avenues for active and passive programming. I have lots of examples for you to share of what I've done and what's been successful for me. And then we're going to reflect and share best practices on student engagement, because I really want to hear what's going on your college campuses as well, because it's important to just see, the impact that's happening across our campuses and institutions. So before we get started, I feel like I wanted to lighten the mood a little bit. I don't know if you guys have saw this image or video, because I thought it was very funny. So just out of curiosity, and if you didn't see the video, I encourage you after today's session to do a quick search, because it's all over Facebook. But what photo captures your feelings about programming? So I'm going to encourage you in the chat, pick a number from 1 through 6 that just captures your mood about programming. And it can be programming during COVID, it can be programming as a whole, but I'm just curious where everyone is thinking in the room this morning. Between 3 and 4. Got some 2s in there, got a few 4s. Before COVID, I was a 2, now you're a 6. Oh, got some 5s in there. 5s, okay. Depends on the day. I hear you. Okay. I feel like I'm a 1. So I hope that by the end of this presentation, everyone could be in the 1 to 3 range of your mood when it comes to programming. So hopefully this is kind of lighten the mood and the energy, but I wanted to make sure that this presentation also just gives a show of my style. When it comes to engaging and connecting, we have to make sure that we're relating. So it was important for me to make sure that was also embedded in my presentation with you all. All right, so I really wanted to get a feel for how many of you guys are currently doing housing. And if some of your videos are off, it's fine, but I am curious just about how many actually have students in on-campus housing. If you want to just raise your hand, if you want to put the hand raise icon, whatever makes sense for you, or you can put the thumbs up, thumbs down. But I'm just curious about how many of you actually have students on campus. How many of you guys are in single occupancy only? No, okay, so we have a mixture, some single, some not. I'm curious about how many of you are in traditional spaces. Are you still occupying traditional spaces? Yeah, okay. Are your community spaces open? Yes, okay, some are, some aren't. How many are in apartment style or suite style spaces? Few in apartment and suite. And then do you guys still have first year students on your college campuses? Yes, okay. So this gives me a good feel for just kind of what the dynamics are on our college campuses, just to give you a little bit of background for CMU, and I'll talk a little bit more, but we do have students that are housed on campus as well, from first year students all the way up to our senior students. So that was great. Thank you for sharing that. So for me, before I begin a presentation, I think it's always important to always start with the why. And that's something that has to really be embedded in our work, is our why. So, I sat and thought about what gets me excited and what is it that I enjoy the most about this work. And it's really being able to develop those meaningful relationships, both with my student staff and my students that live in my residential community. And a lot of that comes through active engagement, through those intentional interactions that I have, and really making sure that I'm providing them with a vibrant residential experience. And that's where kind of my passion and energy comes into programming. I consider myself to really be a creative person. I love to think outside of the box to figure out how can I make connections or foster community in lots of unique spaces. So I've had the opportunities to support first year communities over the last several years. I've been specifically working in apartment style and non-traditional residential spaces. And that's been the area that I've focused on because I find that a lot of people kind of shy away when it comes to working with upper class students or working in these non-traditional residential spaces because the engagement level is very different than when you're supporting your first year community. So for me, I've just been jumping at the opportunity to really be able to shift the narrative and shift the perspective of individuals, both student staff and professional staff, thinking that our upper class students don't want to participate or they don't want to be involved. And that to me is just a myth. And how can we debunk that? How can we get everyone excited about residential programming, both from a student staff level to the students that we're trying to reach? So that's always been kind of my why. I think the residential experience is the core and the hallmark of an on-campus experience. And to be able to do this work, to me, I can make the most impact. So that's always kind of my why. And that then gets embedded into how I go about my work and what guides my work. So I always encourage you all as you begin to develop different initiatives, as you begin to look at your strategic plans, as you begin to try to adjust and pivot your approaches, always really think about your why. So I really want to just capture just some brief trends in student housing. As we know right now, many of us are just really just trying to figure out how do we just navigate COVID-19. This has definitely just completely shifted the way that we do our work in many different capacities. Prior to March, 2020, we were all just going about our semester, high level engagement, high level programming. Everyone was just focused on that residential experience. And then we had to completely pause and stop and reshift our focus. So, originally we were always about fostering that sense of community on campus, blending the academics of our living spaces, having faculty actively involved, having a lot of those living learning communities. We were shifting some of our models of the types of housing that we were offering our students, looking into more apartment style and suite style, giving the students those that independency that they yield for. But now we've had to shift that perspective in which we've had to really reduce student housing capacity. Most institutions have, and some institutions have completely not housed people. Some of us are down to single occupancy. And right now we have to do a lot of health and safety guidelines that are in place in a lot of our residential spaces. We're closing or limiting access to student spaces and having an X number of students allowed in those spaces. I know for some institutions, we've had to take housing communities offline and place for isolation and quarantine housing. And then in addition to that, we've had to modify significantly our residential programming and the way that we support our student staff. But ultimately, our students are still seeking the opportunities to live on campus. That's still definitely a desire and a need from what we've learned from March until today. And then I think another thing that we've learned is that there needs to be a levels of care and transparency that's being provided from housing services staff. I still to this day have a lot of students that outreach, just asking questions, still needing that support. So that need is still there. And then the challenge is how do we as professionals adjust to that, especially when there's just so much ambiguity and uncertainty with regards to how the university is going to respond to the consistent and infrequent changes that we have. So I just wanted to at least capture just some of the trends that we've seen. But I also want to just tackle back to just other things that I've observed in different social networks that I'm involved in, both in different groups on Facebook. I just want to just capture just some of the things that are coming up in conversations about the need for programming, about how do you adjust the attitudes of people wanting to be involved, both for our student staff and some of our residential students. Everyone speaking about, what programming model are you doing? Are you using a residential curriculum? How do you get students involved? So this is definitely a need and a conversation that's happening among our colleagues in the field. So I did want to just at least capture that, to again just highlight how we need to be doing more work in this area to support our students. And again, I think it's really important as I talk that you understand just kind of how Carnegie Mellon University is set up. We are a house model, and that's not like most traditional institutions. So a house-based system, I think there are some schools that still do it. I believe UPenn is a house model. And I know there's maybe a couple other institutions on the West Coast that I think are also house-based models. So with a house model, each house is staffed by a house fellow. Again, this role is similar to your RD, your area coordinator, your assistant director, and then we have a community advisor and a staff of resident assistants. What makes the house model unique is that we all operate differently. While we might have some in sync documents like our residential curriculum, how I program is completely different than how my colleague may program in their building. And that's one of the things that I really enjoy about this work is that the house model gives you the agency to really structure how you want to engage and support both your student staff and your residents that live in your community. So there's some pros and cons to the house model because, for some folks, they really thrive on having like everyone is doing the same thing. We have all the documents that are in line and all the policies and procedures where sometimes the house model gives you a little bit more fluency with that. But we still do have living learning communities. Our student population is roughly about 13,000 students, but that's really split between our undergraduate and graduate students. We typically house first year to seniors, and sometimes we will house graduate students. I think it just depends on availability that we have. Our first year students are required to live in campus housing, and housing is guaranteed for our students as long as they stay in the housing system for those 4 years. So right now with COVID, we've had to completely shift our model. We are significantly dedensified. We have roughly 1,100 students that live on campus. That's a complete shift. We are currently at single occupancy, fully. Everyone is in a single. We do have isolation and quarantine housing. We have required all students to take COVID-19 testing in order to live in on-campus housing, and housing is only guaranteed for 1 semester. We did have an opportunity for special cases for our students who might need all year housing, but right now, housing is only guaranteed 1 semester. So what's been kind of the good part about it is that, as we've adjusted our approach and work, it's been like a trial and error for us where we've been able to really see, okay, how can we adjust our programming? And the good thing is like, if it didn't work, I could try it again in the spring or remodify because I'm not going to have the same group of students. So that's kind of been our approach. Again, it's been pros and cons when it comes to, how we do this work. And it's been lots of lessons learned, I'd say. But regardless, I currently work in an upper class building. I have the largest building right now of apartment style students with a mixture of second year, juniors, and seniors that live in the building. So just a quick snapshot of just CMU. So I do want to talk about just some theories that are just guiding our work. I know we all know a lot about student development theory, so I'm not even going to just go too heavy into this because that has been the foundation. But for me, what has been really the starting point in order for me to kind of just develop how I approach and we go about just our programming is really looking at the appreciative inquiry, the AI inquiry, and it's a strength-based approach to planning and evaluation. There is so much research about AI, and I encourage you to definitely take a look at that because that's a presentation within itself. But I just really wanted to capture some of the key components of it that's really helped me be able to create a playbook for the way that I approach programming on our campus. So the appreciative inquiry or AI, it's based in positive psychology. It really just focuses on generating positive change within groups and communities. It focuses on the strengths and assets in a community or program rather than the problems and details. Things that we've always known by working in this field, we tend to be problem focused and react. But this process really looks about what are we doing well, what can we envision, what should it be, and it really just focuses more so on the positive aspect of our work instead of looking at the deficit focus. Because I think that we've had a habit for many years looking at the deficit focus and responding to the problems rather than just looking at what changes that we can have in a way that's valuing what we do best. So this particular approach by David Cooper Ryder has really been something that I've been using as a tool to guide my work in the way that I establish some strong and evolving communities. So the AI really has a 4D model, and it focuses on discover, dream, design, and deliver. The fourth one, deliver, is also can be translated to destiny, depending on the different research you do. You may see deliver or destiny. But discover, that's that focus during this phase is searching and identifying what gives the organization life. So when you think about your residential spaces, what brings it life? What is the vibrancy like? What is the students like that live in your community? That's where that discovery comes in. And that discovery could also be just taking another step back when you're looking at just as your department as a general, because you may have to look at your department, but it also starts with self. So I really encourage you to think about this in many different facets of looking at both self, looking at your department, and then looking at your specific functional area that you oversee and really think about what's working well. And this is a useful tool to really shift mindsets and vocabulary away from the deficit focused problems mindset. And then we transition to the dream phase. And sometimes we may go back always to the discovery and the dream phase because they're kind of like hand in hand. But the dream phase is about imagining positive futures for your organization, for your team. This is the phase where you will unlock that creativity. This is the space where you think about your visions and all the possibilities that can happen. So when you think about your programming, you begin to start thinking about these are the things that I know we can do. How can, and then we'll then be going to the design phase of what will it be? So this is where that co-creation kind of continues through this phase, but the focus then shifts to what's the shared vision of that team that we have, right? So it's then now bridging the shared visions and those possibilities that you have and really turning that into the work. And then that's when you get into the delivery or the destiny phase. And that's where your innovation and action comes through. And that's kind of the 4D model. And then I do want to just transition into just kind of the benefits of this and what I found to be successful. It's really affirming. And I think that's one of the things that we need the most as professional staff is to feel affirmed in our work. And this particular model and approach really affirms what we do and empowers us to really think beyond just kind of the normal, because sometimes we get so embedded in routine and tradition that it cripples us a little bit. And with the way that we do and approach our work, we have to really make sure that we are staying on point with the current times and the current needs of our students. We have Gen Z that are on our college campuses, and we have to make sure that we're offering amenities and programming and events and services that really speak to today's generations of students. In addition to that, people discover and then build on the root causes of success rather than dissect problems. Like I've sat in many staff meetings where folks are just complaining and upset and talking about different problems that we might be occurring, but never really thinking about solutions. So this really shifts that to think about how can we focus more so on the successes and what works. The AI model also gives people the confidence to take risks. We have to take risks sometimes in the way that we do our work, especially now, because sometimes virtual program will work and sometimes it won't. Sometimes some of our institutions were in a hybrid space, or we are beginning to transition to in-person spaces, but that comes with a little bit of risk taking. And for some folks, that can be hard to do. But this gives folks the confidence to just kind of get out of their comfort zone a little bit and try something new. AI also really focuses on that mindset shift. And I always say that sometimes we have to change the narrative when it comes to the way that we approach our work. It increases curiosity and a sense of vitality. And then it also improves communication, trust, and builds relationships. I've seen this a lot when it comes to my team that I supervise, of how our communication has gotten better. It's helped really establish relationships, both from a staffing standpoint as well as a student standpoint. So this has just been something that, a tool and a framework that I've used. It has been it's really great for folks that are in the process of doing some strategic planning or completely reevaluating or starting from scratch when it comes to programming, or when it comes to the mission and values of your department, or even if you're looking at establishing a residential curriculum or reassessing. So I really encourage you to utilize this particular model because it's been really successful for me, and it's helped with me creating my personal playbook for programming. So now I'm going to get into the kind of the meat and the potatoes. I know the time is ticking, so I wanted to make sure that I gave you a good overview, but really get into the core of my work, which is the programming. So what I wanted to make sure that I brought out is just distinctive elements of your programming approach. You have to be collaborative. I can't speak this enough. In our field and in our work, autonomy does not exist. We have to be very collaborative in the way that we go about our work. And it's just so important, especially during these times, to leverage the expertise of your staff, your faculty, and your campus partners. Like my saying, and everyone can always say this about me, if you ask my student staff, I always say work smart, not hard. And we have to during these times, because it makes no sense for us to keep reinventing the wheel, keep doubling up on things. How can we maximize the expertise, the interests of others for the greater of our community? And then a transition into experience, really incorporating a holistic student experience that has to be embedded in the residential experience that we provide to our students. We have to make sure that we are looking at the entire self of student, both from a personal as well as an academic level, because they go hand in hand. I know we always, we are on the front lines with responding to different crises, but how can we be really proactive to make sure that wellness and well-being is really being embedded, that we're being intentional to get faculty involved in our work, but just making sure we're looking at the holistic development of our students. And then during today's times, we have to include technology. We have to. It has to be integrated to scale our efforts. And even now, like we've all transitioned, the majority of us are either working from home or have had to do remote work in some capacity. Some of our staff, even student staff, I know I've had remote RAs. How are we leveraging technology to really help us be successful? And then finally, data. Data informs our work, and we have to be better with collecting data to guide our continuous improvement. And that will look different across all of our campuses of how we go about collecting data, but it's really important that we are doing that. For me, I've had to do it on a month-to-month basis. Previously, we might have done it by semester, we may have done it by year, but we have to be consistent in the way that we collect our data, especially during these times where everything is changing so quickly. And especially with our programming, we may hit our target and we may miss our mark. So it's really important that you're creating those opportunities for feedback. So some focal points of engagement. So this will vary across your campuses, but for me, these were some of the areas that I found to be important and critical when it comes to doing this work and engaging with students. So looking at both staff training and development, our student staff are the folks that we work closely with. So it's really important that they're connected to this. Our programming, both looking at passive and active programming, community building, making sure that students are feeling connected to the residential experience, but also connected to folks on their floor. And then those intentional interactions. Are we developing those meaningful relationships? I'm pretty sure there's a whole list of things that we could have in this based off of the needs of your communities. But I think that one of the things that I really wanted to draw out is how they all intertwine. They're all connected. And those are the things that we have to just recognize, that we can't just have one bucket here, one bucket here. We have to make sure that everything is intertwined in order to really be our most successful. And before we can really even be able to do this work, you really need to understand your values. What are the values that are most important to you and your community? What are the values that are important to your student staff? What are your values that are important to your department? So you have to really be able to establish those values, because that is what's going to help continuously push those efforts forward, is making sure that your values are clear and that it has a connection to whatever curriculum approach or programming model that you decide to move forward with. So with regards to supporting student staff, these are some of the key things that I found that are very much needed. And the first thing I always tell everyone is you have to be passionate about this work. Your staff, your teams, whether grad students, undergraduate students, or professional staff, they feed off your energy. So if you are not excited about this work, they're going to feel that. And that's what I've learned about programming. Like some of us, like in the earlier I asked you, what's kind of your mood for programming? For those folks that are 4, 5, and 6, and that's this isn't your jam, your team is going to pick up on that. You have to really be give them the motivation and let them feel excited, feel your excitement about this work, so that they can be excited. You'd be surprised how, when you think about staff morale, that is completely connected to you. So that's why I put that as the first thing, because if you're not passionate about it, they're not going to buy into it. And that's going to be the same for your students. So your heart really has to be in this work in order for you to really yield success. And then it leads me into really understanding your team dynamics and strengths. This is so important. So important. I think oftentimes we're not working in our best capacity because we don't really understand the dynamics of our team and our team strengths. And we need to really be able to build off of that. So there's lots of great tools, whether it's Myers-Briggs, whether it's strength-based Gallups, really being able to understand the strengths of your team and leverage that. And another thing that I've learned is that you have to redefine the level of success. Like, it's not about an X number of people attending your programs. It really should be shifting that focus of, did you make a connection? Did you have an interaction with the student? That's a win. And that's what I found that I had to do a lot, especially with our upper class student staff, is really redefine what does success look like, because it's not about having 50 or 100 people to your program. It's really being able to make that meaningful connection, being able to refer a student to a campus resource, being able to just showcase something that you're excited about, having that intentional interaction or one-on-oneness. But those are the things that are pivotal in the hallmark of our work. And I think sometimes we get lost in, we have to have this X number of programs, we need to do this X number of attendance and things like that. And that really just shifts the focus and changes the energy of the team. So I encourage you to really redefine what does success look like, especially during COVID. Because even now, it's even twice as hard to connect and engage with students. Excuse me, and even some that may be remote. So given that, are we looking at how we are, what metrics we're putting in place that determines our success levels? So that's something that has been most helpful. You really want to shift the narrative of upper class students do not care about programs. That's a lie. I've worked with upper class students for several years now, and these students want to be involved. You just have to understand who's in your community and how they want to be involved. So I really encourage you to do a deep dive into really understanding the makeup of your community, what brings that vibrancy. Start talking to students more, asking questions about, what are the programs that get them most excited? And that's when that data comes in. This data is really going to inform your work. I've been working with upper class students for the last several years, and they want to be involved. And I finally feel like that I've captured how to bring their attention. And that's what I'm going to share with you very shortly is all the things that have been successful with getting our upper class students involved. And this does work for first year students as well. First year students are way more eager and more excited to make connections and be in your face. So the emphasis is a little bit more on upper class students, just specifically because I know that folks have found it a little bit more harder to connect support and engage this population of students. Another thing that's important is we have to modify our student staff training. This is again going to vary across campuses, but it's so important to make sure that we're providing our students with the skills. Training has to be skill based in order for them to really be able to see how they can apply these various different practices. It's also very important to establish a culture of gratitude and appreciation. This again tackles back onto the AI model, but your staff want to feel appreciated. There has to be a sense of gratitude, and I think that will ultimately yield to productivity. It really will create a positive staff morale, and lead to a lot of great results to, whatever it is that you're hoping to achieve on your team. And then finally, the thing that I think is really important to highlight is accepting ambiguity and dealing with it. Right now, for many of you, and even for me, this has been probably one of the most hardest semesters to work simply based off of I can't give my team any answers, right? I'm not a part of the senior leadership team. I don't got no seat at the table yet where I'm involved and engaged in those conversations of, what's happening. So my team is feeling uneasy and it's hard. The work is hard that we do, and I can't provide them answers of whether they'll be more students or whether they'll have to do rounds or things that they're just naturally scared about or unsure. So how do we make sure that our teams are coping well with the uncertainty, with the unprecedented times, accepting that, there's a lot of ambiguity, but in the same time, still trying to be transparent and open. So they still have faith that, you're always going to be looking out and trying to advocate for them in their best capacity. So that's why I really think that this is something to highlight, because during these specific times, we have to make sure that our teams are really able to accept ambiguity and adjust and pivot, because that's all this year. If I could pick a word for my work this year, it's pivot, because that's what we've had to consistently do. Okay, so here we go. So I want to jump right into just some of the programming and some of the pieces that have been successful. I will follow up after this slide with many examples. Some things that I have learned and have worked really well is you have to have some purposeful programming. I truly believe quality over quantity. There needs to be some thoughtful promotion in the way that you market and advertise, and you need to be intentional with your venue and location. Right now, that may not make sense for many of us, because I know a lot of us are either virtual or having like small groupings of in-person activities. So that particular bullet may not make sense right now. But for passive programming, understand the power of passive programs. That is what really drives engagement for me right now, is passive programming. And I'll give you lots of examples of things that have really worked well for my community. But passive programming is something that students enjoy. I've gotten so many positive feedback and notes from just different things we've done passively in our residential community. I truly believe in incentives. Sometimes we got to incentivize our work a little bit, and especially with students. So similar to the loyalty card you might get from Dunkin', your free coffee or your ice cream shop, how can you use that model into the residential spaces? So I have come up with a program initiative that really works. So I call it the Fairfax Punch Card, and I'll show you a quick image of that very shortly. And that tool I've been using for the last 4 years, and I've just been shocked by how many students just love utilizing it. They'll come to our programs, bring their punch card, and then we just check it off, and then we just do different raffles monthly. So you can adjust how you want to do giveaways or different things like that. And even during times right now, we're in a virtual space, I've adapted that model to support a virtual space. So I'll give you an example of how I've adapted that as well. So my institution does have a residential curriculum. So the residential curriculum, it just guides our work when we do our programming. But I also use that as a starting point to blend with the program model that I specifically use for my house community. So this can vary across institutions. There's lots of good research about residential curriculums, and that's where we're shifting. We are just in year 2.5, I think, of our residential curriculum. So we're still very new and still in that phase of adjusting, reevaluating, and assessing kind of what works. We haven't branded it just yet. It's still a tool that our RAs are still learning to buy into. So we're not where we are with our residential curriculum. So for me, that's why I couple it with a programming model. And I know that might vary across your campuses. But I think the thing that I do want to call out is that whatever approach you use, whether it's a curriculum or a program model, it has to be adjusted to these upper class and non-traditional spaces, because it's not one size fits all. And I think that's something that we have to call out, is that these structures and mechanisms that we put in place are not one size fit all. And we have to make sure that we're adjusting to fit the needs of our community. And finally, supporting your RA staff. A lot of RAs, some of them always want to go to first year communities. So I usually always get a team that's never worked with upper class, or it's second year students in upper class buildings. So this is where that redefining the level of success comes into play the most, because we have to teach our RAs how to program in these unique spaces during these unique times. So what I wanted to call out, so this is kind of how I set up my semester. So right now I only did it from August to about fall break. Fall break is about this week. So as we began, we started out with 2 floor programs, 2 community events, 1 passive program, and 2 digital engagement posts. That's new. So we really incorporate social media. My team uses Slack, they use GroupMe. We have a Facebook group for our residential community. So whatever kind of makes sense depending on your community, you definitely have to capitalize on it. So I kind of broke it down what our community engagement model looks like. So 2 RAs plan a community event. I have a staff of 10, so that's where the numbers break down. You will may need to adjust this based off of how many student staff you have on your team, because this may not make sense for each team. So each RA does a passive program. Like I said, there's power and passive program, and we require everyone to do a passive program. And then the digital engagement posts, majority of them will post a YouTube video. They might do a TikTok. They might do an article that they feel excited and passionate about that they read, but they're posting it in our Facebook group and really driving the engagement. So this has worked with us. And then we are reshifting it from probably about next week until the end of the semester, and cutting this down to 1 program, one large scale community event as we begin to kind of close out our semester. So typically this is not how we have our normal fall semester, but this is the changes I've made in order to respond to just how many students we have in our residential community and being primarily virtually. All of our events have been virtual. My student staff has no interest in doing in-person gatherings. We did get approval on campus to do some small in-person gatherings, but my team is not interested. So I'm not pushing it. But for those that do in-person gatherings, I think the things that you want to just keep in mind is whatever your institution policies are on as far as social distance guidelines. Another thing that I talked about early was our programming punch card. I literally made this off of Vistaprint. You can get 500, 1,000 cards for under $50. So this was super simple to make. I'm happy to share a template for anyone that's interested in. I've been using this for the last 4 years, both at my prior institution and then at my current institution. And this again has driven engagement so much. I have made many connections, both from me trying to connect with students, and this has been a great tool for my RAs to also make connections, because they're able to leverage this to say, hey, I'll check off your programming punch card if, come to my program, or if you reply back to my email. So this has been a really great tool for us to use to really make connections and drive engagement. I did shift this a little bit. Oh, wait. So this one is another passive program that we do that I just started this semester that is working out really, really well. And this is called Fairfax Freebies. So that's the name of my building. And just to be mindful of social distancing, we got these brown bags off Amazon. I created some stickers, super cost effective. I think this was probably for $250, which is what I needed, under $60 of me creating this. And then we put a bag on everybody's door when they moved in. And then every time we do some type of giveaway or want to provide a snack, we tell our students, leave your freebie bag on your door, and we drop it off. So this has been something that has worked really well. Same for our DIY programs, or if an RA is doing Like I had an RA do like postcards for the floor. We just have them just leave it on their door. And this is a good opportunity for your staff to kind of assess who wants to be involved as well. So for the folks that leave it on their door, you know that they want to be involved, but it also gives you a target of who are the folks that I haven't reached yet. So this has really been a great tool to help them also figure out how can I best reach those students who aren't necessarily engaging with me. But this has been super successful for us. And students really enjoy it. I pushed out a survey and they said they want more opportunities where they can utilize their Fairfax freebies. So I've connected with different offices to just figure out what type of free swag they can give me that I can drop in these bags as well. So this has been something that's worked. Another thing that I did is COVID Cash. So this is like the alternative to my programming punch card. And I now call it COVID Cash. So how can we capitalize on this new change that we have in our residential community, and really reward positive behavior? Because it's just different. Like we can't have visitors. Everyone has to wear masks. You need to be socially distant. So I came up with this concept of COVID Cash, and it's our way of thanking you for being involved in the community. So I worked with my team to develop the criteria of how can a student earn COVID Cash, and they came up with 10 different things. You know, who's the first to log into a virtual event? Who replies back to my email? Who is practicing wellness and self-care? Like we wanted to identify what are the key things and what do we value and how do we get our community involved in that as well. And this has been a great tool for me as a professional staff, to engage with residents as well. I'll shoot an email out, and it was just this past week. I said you can earn 2 COVID tickets if you tell me how you're going to rest this weekend. 15 responses. So this has been a really great tool for me to interact with students. Like I've automatically made 15 interactions, and I then give that to my student staff to say, these are the 15 people that responded to me, follow up with them because they do want to be engaged, but we just have to figure out how to capture their attention. I have a whole list of details about this if anyone's interested. I have the marketing email that I sent out to the student. I have the template for this COVID Cash that you can adjust to fit your team. So if anyone is interested in this, I'm happy to send this resource to you as well. And then these are just some of the programs my team has done that's been super successful. I have one RA that is always up at the crack of dawn, and she wanted to do an early morning program. So she did it at 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. And surprisingly, she had students come. Like I sat in one morning at 6 because I was up. And I was shocked to see 3 other students on the call. And they're just connecting, they're just vibing. So it's really tapping into your team and knowing their strengths. And this particular student, staff of mine, she's a morning bird and she wanted to figure out, I'm sure there's other people that want to talk. She literally sat on Zoom for 3 hours and folks kind of came in and out. And she was just surprised by how well it was received. And this was open to everyone on her floor and in the community. So this worked out really well for her. We are now doing our upcoming is a Thai curry cook along. We sent an email out to our community and posted in our social media networks where they voted on what they wanted to cook. And then for the first few people that signed up, we provided some of the ingredients. So of course, depending on your budgets, this could work. We're doing just different things when it comes to cook-alongs. I know another team is doing like a Blue Apron style where they're giving just some specific ingredients and then providing recipes and then doing it virtually. We did a DIY craft for the Mid-Autumn Festival celebration. We have done a wellness bingo. This is a passive program. Like I'm a strong advocate for wellness and well-being. So we created a bingo card, and pretty much if you complete 5 squares, you get a raffle ticket. The more you complete, the more raffle tickets you can earn. And then we just raffle off wellness types of things, yoga mats, tea, books. This really worked well. So I'm happy to share this template for anyone that wants to do a wellness bingo. We did study hours in a virtual space. And then there's so many different games that my team likes. So they did Scribble and snacks. And again, when we're passing out different snacks to be mindful of social distancing, we're using those freebie bags, telling them to put on their doors, and then my team just drops off. So that's how we're able to still give our students different resources, but still making sure we're practicing social distancing. Okay, so these are just some of the favorites of my team. Kahoot, Scribbly, Among Us is like really popular right now. That has been something that they've been utilizing. Jack in the Box, we've done virtual escape rooms and we've done watch parties. I know I'm short on time, so I'm going to just slide through some of these last few slides that I have. Another thing that I do want to make sure I'm pointing out is, thinking about community building. How do you get folks to feel connected? And these are the things that have really worked well with me. One of the main things I need to call out is your engagement timeline. This is super important, is when are you engaging with the folks that live in your spaces? And right now, that's of course going to shift and vary, but engagement really needs to start in the spring for those folks that are being in your community for the upcoming academic year. You need to have some type of summer communication, and then it needs to be consistent. How can you build up that momentum before they even start? I'm an advocate of newsletters, especially now that we're virtually. My team does a weekly newsletter, and I'll show you some examples. But the RAs really love it. And right now, Canva is such a great tool for them that they have jazzed up these newsletters. And it's literally one page that they send out to their floor. So we do weekly emails, and that's been a way that they're able to connect with their residents. Another thing is that's important is you need to understand the identity of your respective community and establish a sense of pride. So you may not have picked up on this. My building is called Fairfax. Our symbol is a fox, and that's embedded on everything that I do. So I send them an email, say, hey, Fairfax foxes. A couple of my other colleagues, they're pineapples and flamingos, and the sense of pride is embedded in many of our house communities. So it's really important for you to establish an identity. Another tool that I use is the basic model, and that's through the Akuho I resources you can find. Building a strong and evolving community. This 6-step development model has really helped with my team being able to make intentional interactions with their residents. So I really encourage you to look at that resource. That 6-step model has been really a great training resource that we've used for our entire RA staffs. It's really important as you as professional staff to make sure you're engaged in doing this work and not just your student staff. So what are you doing to be involved in your community? And finally, utilizing your building rosters to identify those pockets of opportunities. I'm not sure what your rosters look like, but we both have photo rosters and floor rosters. Here, we're able to identify how many majors we have of each student in our building, what are the colleges, what classes we have. We dissect this per floor so the RAs are truly understanding who is on their community. And this is what helps and builds connections on our floors. These are just some features of like our weekly newsletters that they do. As you can see, my RAs get really excited and into them. So this just captures that. This is the sense of pride that I was telling you about. We have some whales, we have pineapples, one community is a pig. We are really into establishing identity and tradition in our spaces. So I really encourage you to think about, what does pride and tradition look like for your community? We use a snack bag. Right now, I had to improvise because of COVID. So we have a snack cart, and we utilize our freebie bags to drop off different snacks to students when the RAs are doing rounds to make sure that they're still feeling connected to that experience. I know I don't have time, so I really want to use the last 5 minutes or so for folks to ask questions. Hold on, I was supposed to give you the link as well. So I'm going to just keep this screen up so that you guys can see the QPR as well as the evaluation link. But I would love to spend the last few minutes to answer any questions if you have any. There's my email, so feel free to email me if any of the resources that I shared are helpful to you. I'm happy to send over that information as well. So I hope that you all were able to get some takeaways from my presentation today and really see how I've created my own playbook. And just to kind of just wrap up, it's really important for you to have some form of framework. The AI model has been really successful for me, and I encourage you to really do a little bit more research in that approach. And I think that will really create and empower your staffs to do this work. So I encourage you to look at that. And when it comes to your programming, the bottom line is you have to be passionate and excited about this work. in order for you to really have the most success. So please make sure you're keeping in mind just some of the elements that I mentioned: collaboration, experience, leveraging that technology, and really making sure the data informs your work. Again, I have lots of examples for programming. This is just a few that I picked out. So if you have other ideas or resources, I have plenty to share with you all, and I'll make sure that it's included in the presentations that will be posted later. But if you guys have questions, I'm happy to answer it. If not, I know there's a 10 o'clock session. I encourage you all to make sure you go to the business meeting. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Gwendolyn. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Just a reminder, make sure you fill out the evaluation. I was going to put it in the link, but I could not get the form to open on my computer this morning. My internet has been in and out through this session. So please make sure you take some time to go find that link.
All right. I like to see faces, so I turn my presentation off. But regardless, I'll be here for at least the next few minutes if anyone wants to chat. But if not, have a fantastic day. Enjoy the rest of the conference. And please, please, please go to the business meeting. That is just so important to our work. So make sure you guys are stopping at the business meeting.